Stars, dots, white lights, black, giant light. Spacecraft 2201, standard A class 304. Black, tether, stars, white space boots, helmet glare. Smaller spacecraft 2201, standard A class 304. Broken tether, black. I remember Layla. God, how I remember Layla. Layla, the way I left her sobbing in the middle of the living room. She stood surrounded by hand-me-down furniture from our respective parents, grandparents, cousins, a ripped leather couch, a television stand from the 70s, a lamp clothed with an intricate fabric mural, reminders that people believed in us and what we had. Were they so wrong, though? The way she stood there, her bottom lip slightly protruding, whimpering, whispered 1,000 yeses. The regret that pulled and the tears she fought so hard to keep restraint behind her eyelashes was the only thing I noticed. We were arguing, yet I couldn't remember exactly the words that had been said. I knew I was being an ass, as usual, yet I was angry at her. She didn't understand the gravity of the task being asked of me. How I waited my entire life for that moment. She was ruining it for me. She was angry too. I promised her a future with me. The engagement ring on her finger sat testament to this. Cost me my priceless motorbike I bought myself after high school graduation, back when my father was around to give me a pat on the back and remind me to wear my helmet. The teardrop-shaped diamond was almost ironic at this point, mimicking the actual thing that slithered along her sloped cheekbone and lingered at her chin before detaching from its lifeline. Layla, I chose the unknown over her. My packed duffel sitting by the door was my decision made. I was never safe, she always was. Yet she took a risk with me. I was unstoppable, unpredictable, like the nature of space, that forbidden word. I now knew why that word was forbidden, living a fate that contained it to my office. The wetness of her eyes at the mention of space, the coldness of her palms that I attempted relentlessly to warm. The room seemed to expand, the wooden floor panels detaching from each other, the furniture ripping from the seams. The walls began to crack and tug apart, the roof collapsing on itself. She was giving me my space, and yet I never even knew I was suffocating. During my first few weeks in the space program, they tried to acclimatize us to life on a space shuttle. There were simulators for what seemed to be every situation, protocol, and launch sequence. My classmates and I were completely enthralled by everything we learned. Yet nothing could top the Sonny Carter training facility. It housed the world's largest indoor pool, or the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. The pool held full-size replicas of space stations for us to train on while it simulated the weightless environments of space. We were so excited to use it to finally learn the one thing that every astronaut dreamed of doing. Some people groaned when they found out we would have to train for 10 hours in the pool for every 1 hour spent in space, but I didn't care. The longer I spent on the water, the more likely I would be picked for missions with spacewalks. While underwater, I imagined myself among the stars. I was breathless. I felt if I tried hard enough, I could surpass the rest of my peers and surface on the top. But it didn't matter what mission they picked me for. I would do anything for my chance. When I had finally found out I was picked as a farmer, not an EVA specialist, I cried silently in my room that night, the second time in my life. The next morning, I woke up and I went back to the pool. Space is no place for the faint of heart. I knew this and overcame it. Everything I wanted was beyond Earth's atmosphere, among the stars. When I looked out of my poor hole in that box I called a room, I enjoyed the nothingness, the emptiness between me and the rest of the world. The distance had made me feel special. I was chosen to do a job that so many others had dreamed of doing. I had a unique ability to see the world in a way that few had been able to see it before. From this angle, everything seemed small, like being on an airplane a few minutes after taking off, before passing into the clouds, looking down and seeing cars reduced to the size of ants. To something small, an object may look big. To something big, that same object may look small. It's all about relativity. When I saw the ship, the large metal box I would be living on for the duration of my mission in this cramped NASA hangar, it looked ginormous. Being in my little room, it felt a bit smaller, but now that I am disconnected from all aspects of life, both Earth and my ship in sight, it begins to look tiny. I look down at the tether that has never left my hand. following its coiled mess to its frayed end, and in that moment, I regain consciousness. I attempt to pivot my body, which causes me to begin spinning. Slowly, I see Earth below me. I wish I was falling. I notice that even though I am now among the stars, they are still little bright dots light years away. I feel my breath rate increase, the monitor on my wrist alerting me to this a few seconds later. I become practical, slow my breathing, look back at my ship. Would they come for me? No, they couldn't. Too much of a waste, resource, manpower. I wasn't usually a cynic, but in this scenario, that was my only option. I was never a man of great emotion, having only cried once or twice in my life with the death of my mother and only one tear's worth. I had been disparaged in my previous relationships for being unemotional. A freak, one girl in particular, called me as tears fell down her face in hysterics. The irony of that was that she was the one who cheated on me, and she was only crying because she got caught. Sometimes I wondered what would happen if I stayed with her. Heather, that was her name. She was far from the perfect girlfriend, yet if I could have spared Lila and myself a heartache. Breaking the news to Heather that I would be going to space and likely not coming back would not have gone over well. Yet I knew that Heather would have gotten over it a lot quicker than Lila, likely with the help of a few randoms from the bar. I was never going to marry Heather. I think we both knew this. In some sense of the world, we both needed each other to fulfill some missing aspects in our lives. For her, I gave the stability that her parents in previous relationships couldn't. For me, Heather got me out of my comfort zone, exposed me to the experiences I would have gone without otherwise. We were never truly right for each other, yet for a while our relationship was good. I imagined the alternative once again, leaving her for space instead of Lila. I imagined how freeing it would have felt, a weight off my shoulders. It would have been hard, that I cannot deny. Like leaving behind your childhood stuffed animal when you deemed yourself too cool for it. On the one hand, it is a step forward. On the other, there is something missing for a while. A bit of comfort you no longer have. Losing Heather was like deliberately putting that stuffed animal in storage. Losing Lila was like deliberately ripping out your own heart. But it was all for the cause, the program, which I had been working towards my entire life. How could I abandon the only consistency I'd ever have? The answer, I couldn't. The rising moon on a clear nightfall nearly goes unnoticed until the sun completely fades, and all that is left is reflected light. Much like the moon, the tail end of one's timeline often disappears deep within the subconscious. Yet once the moon is staring right into your face, the timeline surfaces and suddenly you cannot deny your own part played in where you are now and remain blaming the reflection from the sun for guiding you to your destination. It's cold. I realize how useless my spacesuit really is. Finite oxygen, lack of insulation, tethers that break. How did it break? I racked my brain, yet I couldn't remember anything after exiting the spacecraft, taking in my first breath completely outside and seeing space throughout my entire field of view. It was breathtaking, the view, being completely immersed in a foreign territory. I felt as though I was completely underwater. The sensation of knowing that you were completely submerged in an atmosphere that could kill you without the proper gear caused adrenaline to run through my bloodstreams. I looked at my heavily gloved hands, making attempts at fist in the minimally flexible suit, the toolkit attached to my hip. I panicked thinking about the intricate repairs that must be done with hands not equipped to do so. And suddenly I was off ship. I looked at my hip, the toolkit is gone. Turning my head, I scanned the expanse for anything nearby. Nothing. I checked my oxygen levels. 25% remaining. How long have I been unconscious? A full oxygen tank could have lasted around 16 hours. Doing the math quickly in my head, I estimate that I have around 4 hours of oxygen left. I tapped the screen on my watch, having run a full diagnostic check on my suit to make sure it was only my tether that had broken. It beeped once, twice, 2 errors were found. I used voice activation, diagnosed abnormalities. The female-oriented AI replied, Abnormality 1, tether disconnection, no tie-off point located. Diagnosed abnormality 2, this was life or death. Small leak located in central oxygen tank. What is the consequence of abnormality 2? I hesitate. Consequence of abnormality 2, oxygen will decrease at a rate of 1.43332%. I had less time than I thought. I curled my legs as far to my chest as I could, increasing my centripetal force and causing me to spin faster. I watched the ship, earth, and the sun take turns crossing my views before shutting my eyes, hugging myself and spinning off into oblivion. My mother died when I was 15, and it was only then that my father and I realized that she was the glue keeping our family together. We would often crack harmless jokes at her expense, believing a lie that it was us against her. When she passed is when I had solidified my plans to leave as soon as I could. I finished high school strong, graduating with honors and receiving numerous scholarships to my top pick colleges. My father showed as much support as he could, but nothing could compare to my mother rooting me on from the sidelines. The day of my graduation, seeing the empty chair they had reserved in her honor was the most hollow I had felt in my entire life. After I left the house, I watched from afar as my father sunk into a depression. He was alone much earlier than he believed he'd be, and he didn't know how to cope. He could barely take care of himself. I visited him a few times in the beginning, but slowly began to show up less often as the state of the house deteriorated, as was the state of my father. The last time I remember visiting, I walked into a house filled with garbage, rotten food, empty beer cans, and bottles of vodka littering the floor. He had impulsively bought a dog, his last-ditch attempt at some type of companionship which clearly did not work. The waste from the dog accumulated along the carpet and hardwood floors of my childhood home, making it almost unlivable. I stayed for 20 minutes, making small talk with my drunk or hungover father. It was hard to tell. Before leaving, I held back tears in the car, chalking up to my eyes watering from the putrid smell of the home, before calling animal control and driving off. I had heard that they came and took the dog away. It was outside, tied up to the big oak tree that used to hold a swing for me when I was little. I got a call from my father, cussing me out. That was the last time I had heard from him. My oxygen is low. My female AI companion is shut off to preserve battery life. The spacecraft is just a blip among many other blips, as am I, as is the world. I again think of Layla, my father, those I left behind so selfishly. Now is all for nothing. My outlandish claims that what I was doing was for the greater good were, and have always been, outlandish. I am cold, yet the phantom sensation of her arms wrapped around me warms my psyche. Now I cannot tell if the slender, feminine arms belong to Layla or my mother. I do not care. I relish the comfort induced by the hallucinations my lack of oxygen have caused. I relish in the life that once was, that could have been had I not been so arrogant and eager. The life of an astronaut is one of lonesomeness. You leave everything you have ever known behind to join a crew who may not even be able to speak your language. You minimize your existence willingly for the greater good of humanity. You see the world where you grew up and realize how small it is, how nothing matters. Yet at the same time you realize how everything mattered. You lay awake at night, replaying old conversations you've had, pointing out the parts that made you an ass, and thinking of a million things you could have said differently. Being up here is like being in a strange limbo, a purgatory. You are neither alive nor dead, and you were forced to comb through everything that had happened to get you here. My watch beeps for the final time, as if it were saying goodbye before powering off entirely, and I wait.